Hello, I am very excited to be here. I haven't done one of these lives in a long time, so hopefully I'm not too rusty. We have our newest ambassador for 2024. We have two of them this year that we've added to our roster of wonderful women within the sport in various ways. And so one of them is joining us today, and it's going to be Lita Mae Button. I will let her explain kind of her story and how she got into boxing, what she's doing in boxing, all the various things. I don't want to maybe take away from her story or take away from the time frame of it, because to be honest, I don't know it in its entirety. So I'll let her jump on. If you do have any questions for her ahead of time or as we're going through this, then, please ask away. I'm going to get her to join us. So if you have any questions as we're going through it, type it in the bottom, and either we'll kind of stop the conversation or save it for the end when we have more of a Q&A opportunity. 1 second, Lita. I'm going to invite you to join us, and then hopefully something should pop up on your end to be able to do so. I'm going to invite you again. Hopefully that should work. I'll give it a second to give her a moment to join us. She's unable to join. Okay, let me try this one more time. Hi, Lita Mae. How's it going?
Hi, going well. I was trying to do this on my desktop because it's much easier, but now I have to do it on my phone with technology.
No worries. You are here. I haven't said too much, as I know you kind of joined in a little bit earlier. I guess to kick it off, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, I guess explain obviously who you are in general, but more so from the boxing perspective. So I guess how you got into boxing, your journey through the sport, and then we'll start there, and we'll kind of run through kind of further questions as we go from there.
Okay. How much time do we have? I don't think we clarified that before because I'm writing a book.
We've done about 30 minutes to an hour. So, okay. Obviously explain things that maybe are, I don't want to say like more important, but I guess explain, its entirety. And then if there's certain things that like come up and you want to kind of briefly touch on them more, then go for it. And I think it's better to understand kind of the entirety of your story rather than like chop it up too much. So take it away.
All right. So let me give you the professional aspect first of myself. So I have a Bachelor of Sciences in nursing with experience in geriatric and long-term mental health care, 45 amateur boxing fights. The first when Golden Gloves was first introduced in Canada, first light welterweight Golden Glove champion of Canada in 2013, and then 1-on-1 as a professional. And then in 2017, I was voted Fab Female Health and Wellness Entrepreneur of the Year in Greater Toronto area. So I specialize now in working with women, helping them increase their energy while decreasing their emotional and physical pain so that they can have the confidence with their body they deserve, as well as I help people with Parkinson's move beyond perceived limitations so that they can age with a better quality of life. Boxing, though. Okay, so everybody always says, how do you get into boxing?
How did nursing, transition into boxing?
So I'll tell you my story. When I was a teenager, I had really low self-esteem, even though I did sports, like I did high-level swimming sports. Looking at Summer McIntosh right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was my dream. But I was torn out of that. And because of that, I was really like, I had low self-esteem, didn't feel like I was worthy, never really could complete the things that I started. And I just had always this constant self-doubt, which led me to a very unhealthy relationship around the age of 21, 22, which when you have low self-esteem and you're not in an unhealthy relationship, you take risks you probably shouldn't, which that risk ended me in a situation with which I got the best gift of my whole entire life besides boxing was my son. So that was in 2003 that he came along, which was unexpected, but it really helped me get things together. But for those of you that are watching who may be parents, because of that healthy relationship, I knew staying in that relationship for my son wasn't the best scenario, raising him that way. So I made that hard decision. There's a lot of other stuff in that and stories and that in between, but I made that hard decision because I knew that's what was best for us and best for him to grow up in a healthy environment. However, your first year of trying to be a parent, you're trying to figure it out. Okay. When you're a sole parent, you're really feeling like you're like a ducky in the water trying to keep your head up. Your feet are constantly doing this. In the same token that these things were happening, my son also began getting, like around the 6-month mark, he began getting really funny bruises. And I was in that time, I was living in co-op housing. And my parents weren't in the vicinity helping me. And so whatever reprieve I had, I don't know, whoever was like saw my son and bruises, but they called CAS on me, Children's Aid Society. So I was very scared and very emotional because I knew I'd done nothing wrong. Children's Aid Society saw the same thing, but I was still left with the fact that what the fuck is going on with my child? Like, I don't know. And what happened within like a few months after, we were referred to Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto, and he was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder called hemophilia B, factor 9 deficiency. So I won't go into too much of the scientific things of it, but it is a blood disorder that is mostly passed down through the genetic, through the mother's side of the family. But my side of the family had nothing. You know, nobody had this blood disorder. So again, probably gonna swear a lot in this interview. Okay, we'll get to the nickname of what my nickname over the years of fighting. And I was like, what the fuck is happening in my life? What is going on? Like, this is like, I'm already a single parent. Like, his dad didn't take any, or his father didn't take any responsibility. Like, why is this happening to me, you know? But I couldn't focus so much on the why, because I had to focus on the coping and doing what for him, making sure that he'd stay out of the hospital as much as possible. God forbid that he should die, because in history, hemophiliacs died of hepatitis A because of tainted blood. And there was no treatments as well. So they would often die of internal bleeding or some sort of something that would happen. So there was a lot of emotions that were running through my mind and my body. And needless to say, when you're young, and I think most of us go through it, I began coping in a very unhealthy way. So I began drinking too much at night, just to cope with my emotions, not processing them, not not dealing correctly with the way I should have been dealing with things, which led me to one night out with Barry with friends of mine, again, drinking too much. And I'd had a couple years in college where I'd taken some kickboxing, and I had a few competitive kickboxing matches in the States and in Quebec. So I knew how to handle myself. I knew how to defend myself. There was these 3 girls who approached me on the street wanting the cab that I was trying to get. I had been jumped when I was 18, along like a few years before my son came along, and that's why I took the kickboxing. You know, self-defense is very, very important. And I remember that feeling when I was 18, and it was the same feeling those girls gave me, and they also called me a number of names, which are really not appropriate. for me to say live. And so I snapped. Like I remember those emotions thoroughly, like how angry and how livid and how much. And there was three of them and me. Needless to say, they got in the cab, bloody and bruised, and not happy with the way they got in the cab. But I was so angry after that. And reflecting on it a few days after, I was like, what the heck did I do? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm here 23, 24. The father's not in the picture. I love my parents, but it's not their responsibility to look after my child. I'm the only sole like person that he needs. You know, he's the one that looks up to. I'm that rock that he needs for him. If I'd gotten arrested and gotten on charges, what kind of impact, what kind of like role model am I showing my child? So I stepped back into the local kickboxing gym at that time in Peterborough, which was 2004. Yeah, just before 2005. It was that fall of 2004. And I was like, I need to do something to channel my emotions, right? But for those that are in the MMA kickboxing world in Ontario at that time, it was not like amateur, even professional wasn't legal in Ontario. It took us a long time in Ontario for those kinds of things to actually be legal. So I wouldn't have the competitive aspect. So at the time there was the boxing club, which was named Bell Boxing. And the head coach, Scott Eccles, knew of my previous little bit of kickboxing experience. And he said, boxing has a lot more opportunities competitive wise than kickboxing because it's all illegal. And it was just like there was a spark in me that was lit, and a drive and a passion that I'd never ever felt before besides being a parent to my son. And within that year I fought at nationals, fought at provincials, qualified for nationals, got silver. And then within that time frame from 2005 until 2014, you know, I graduated university. I was just driven to eat, breathe, sleep, soak in boxing as much as possible. I did the nursing, did some experience in that. But with Kaya, my son, who I shouldn't so much say his name, he doesn't like me talking about social media or poking on like pictures and stuff. I just wanted to do the best that I possibly could and be that role model that he could look up to. Like when you put your mind and whatever to it, you can do it. You know, if you have the drive, you have the discipline, you have the dedication, you have the focus. And most importantly, boxing is the community. You know, I mean, I love my family. I'm here in Newfoundland now with my family, but I never felt that kind of non-judgmental support before in a community, you know. And especially as women, if you have aggression, you know, throughout history, it's not so cool to show your aggression or show your, you know, your anger. And it's a safe environment to do that. Hey, you know what? I can like take out all my frustrations in that, and it's not illegal. I'm not going to get arrested. Let me do this.
At that time, out of curiosity, because I know, for example, for people that are watching it that are maybe just boxing now, what was the girls and or women boxing community like at the time? Because I obviously want to get to this later, but you know, I imagine it was not the same as it is today in terms of, well, one, it wasn't in the Olympics, so it's not like that could even be like a pathway for you. But I also just feel like, you know, I joined the boxing community in probably 2012, like very early stages. And even at that point, it was like on the cusp of picking up. So I was just curious to know, like at that time, were you the only woman in the gym? Were there 1 to 2 others? Was like, what was the scene like then?
In the gym at the time, actually we had quite a few, maybe because we were country girls, so we were a little bit more rough around the edge. So there was quite a few of us in the gym, and Scott Eccles was really, really supportive, and his daughter, she was a little bit younger at that time than us. She was in and out of the gym. So there was about 3 or 4 of us in a gym of maybe like a membership of 40, 50 maximum people.
Okay.
And two of us were were quite competitive. Like Erin Krikoski, she was very, we went to my first tournament, we went away together alone in Nashville in the first like 2 years. And that was absolutely awesome. And it was actually an all women's tournament in national. So we wanted the experience, right? So we, like, even our coaches couldn't travel with us. Experience is the key to progress in boxing. So no matter what, I mean, I'd have to spar a lot of guys. You know, there was a lot of hard knocks that you take and frustrations at not having the techniques and that behind you to kind of overtake the strength of some people that I would spar with at times. But I was so determined and gritty that I was like, I'm gonna freaking make this work one way or another. Like there's just something so deep within me. And looking back on it now, I can understand why. It's because it's my life's purpose and my life's path, right? So,
And I know, like, obviously not to like divert that way, but I would definitely say that your son is like, you're definitely the perfect role model for like all of the things that you had mentioned earlier that you said that like you wanted to achieve. Like, it sounds like, you know, yes, you had moments, but you took them, and however long it took for you to get there, like you took the opportunity to change your life around, is really what it sounds like. So I commend you for that. And I'm like trying like not to like tear up on the camera, but it's very like noble of you to like really take the time to be like, how can I really turn this around? But like you did it for him, but you also did it for yourself too. Like I think that like maybe you did it for him, but it really ended up being for the both of you in the end.
yeah. And this is why I always tag the phrase like boxing saves lives. Like it saved my life and it's saving others. And because of the impact it's in for me, I'm passing it on to my clients, you know, and everyone else. It's like everybody thinks of boxing as so violent when they don't understand it, myself included. When I was younger, I didn't understand boxing. I watched Lennox Lewis and stuff. My dad and my grandfather watched it. And I was okay, you know, but I didn't understand the philosophy and the mindset and the spirituality behind it, you know. So when you can embrace that, it's a life changer, like completely. You know, it looks so simple. That's like boxing. We also hear boxing's like the poor man's sport. You think of the extreme example of Manny Pacquiao, right? But you don't need anything. You just need to have a coach. You just need to have like you know, the willingness to put the work in. And you will reap the rewards if you keep putting the work in and showing up each and every time.
Agreed. So amateur boxer, went to provincials, nationals. Now take us from, I mean, you can obviously share those experiences. I imagine those were very big, considering you probably didn't think you were going to go there when you first started. Obviously you were probably like, I want to compete, but I guess did you ever think about going to that provincial or national level at the time?
No, I just knew that I wanted, like, I've always been competitive kind of person, right? So especially when I was younger, like I was in my mind, like my vision was the Olympics. My vision was being a coach in the Olympics when I was younger. And I just knew that the more like effort I put into it, the more it gave me, the more it taught me. Even though there's such like the smallest things in boxing are almost like the bigger things. So I didn't, it took me a number of years to build up that confidence because I knew I always wanted to go pro eventually. Like,
Okay.
So let me back it up a little bit because 2012 was the very first Olympics that women's boxing was integrated into Olympics, which Mary Spencer, God love Mary because I do, she's an amazing woman. We used to be sparring partners. She would come out to Atlas Boxing, and she was going through a match with Ariane Forte for the national title. So I was there for a couple nationals watching that. But as a southpaw, Ariane's a southpaw, so Mary used to come and we would train to help her get ready to beat Ariane, right? And so it was really wild watching her make the 2012 Olympics and, you know, help her on that journey to get there. And I even say tagline, I don't really tell this story too much, but I was in 2012 Olympics, but on the screen. So you know how they have like in the live feed they have all the athletes doing their different displays.
Yes.
Well, we filmed ours before. Like Mary asked me to come out to do some sparring with her, so they filmed that. And so during the 2012 Olympics, I was the blue chick with the long ponytail that was getting punched in the head by Mary.
Like I saw a post about this prior to like this Summer Olympics starting, with you saying something along those lines. So as you kind of mentioned, you know, as much as boxing is an individual sport, you are in the ring against your opponent. It's a very much community team sport, right? Like, I don't want to say Mary couldn't have done it without you, but without that body helping her, she couldn't have, right? So it does really take a team. I guess who were like a few of like the more impactful people? I'm assuming your first boxing coach, I think his name you said was Scott. Yeah. Like, so he's like definitely is one of them. Who are some other people that were, you know, a part of like, I would say like your main team or base that really either helped you with sparring or helped you in other ways, right? Like there's always like the nutrition aspect, the mental aspect, which I don't really think they're touched upon as much.
No.
Maybe with your background, you probably had the nutrition a little bit more under control.
To be honest, I had to figure a lot of that stuff out on my own. And because I became obsessive compulsive, like it was just like that lifestyle and I wanted to know more. At first for my own perspective, because like as even though I've always kind of coached and trained people, never like at that time it wasn't full time because I was nursing about 4 or 5 years for almost full time, but I always kept coaching people on the side, personal training people on the side, because it's just what I was passionate about. A lot of coaches, I don't know now what it may be like, but they don't like, they're sport specific, right? So it does require like a holistic coach will look at all the aspects to help guide their athlete, you know. And so I say that not in terms of what I'm going to share about who was also in my corners at that time. I think it's just the old school way. Like, I mean, I had a lot of I had Adrian Teodorescu, so he was a major influential. Like I was training with him 3 or 4 years. That's why I moved to Toronto, and that was like a major pivotal point for my boxing career. Because I mean, Adrian took a shining and a liking to me when he saw me at a tournament, and he's like, in his Romanian accent, "God love you, Adrian," because I know you're watching. He's passed on in 2015.
His son Armand might be watching. You never know.
Yes, this is true. So they took me in like as a family when I was in Toronto. So he had a major impact in terms of my passion and my love and learning for boxing, because Adrian I don't know, maybe there's other people in Canada, but he's the only coach I've ever known to have a PhD in boxing. The man has so much, or had so much knowledge and passion, and he was always eager to pass it down with kindness to so many. Like, I mean, I met what do you call it? Lennox Lewis throughout the years, because he would come in and he would still call Adrian for what do you call it? Like for advice on major fights that he was going through at the time, right? So he was a major person. Armand as well. Like they were like a second family to me for about 3 or 4 solid years, which was being a sole parent. You know, it makes a big difference when you have the people that support you in your corner. And then I wasn't feeling like I was growing the way that I want to. And this happens with athletes over the years. You know, they switch coaches, did a lot of reflective thinking. And I did recreationally with Undisputed Boxing with Archie Luz for about a year. I loved Archie, still love Archie to death, because when you're a woman and you might not have the best relationships with men, when you have a coach who's a man who really admires the strength and guts of a strong woman and like helps cultivate and bring that out to you, there's a certain safety that you feel and respect and confidence that you bring within yourself that comes out of you when you have a coach like that. So I always thank and love Archie so much for that, because not all male coaches are the best at that. everybody's got different things to their personality. So he was another pivotal coach, but he wasn't registered with the boxing organizations at that time. So it was a year. I'm like, I can't stay inactive. Like, you want to progress in the boxing world? I mean, I was working nursing full-time shift and being a mom. Kai was in another hospital, so it was hard for me to train anyways. But I'm like, I'm not going to be young for that much longer. This is where my number one boss, who I'll always call him number one boss, RG Grant, came into the picture. Or more, I sought him out because one of the girls I trained with at Atlas, she went undisputed, and I somehow kept following her. I don't know how this happened. They laughed. Priscilla, I forget Priscilla's last name now, but she was at Grant's, and she's like, Lita, you need to come over to Grant's. She's like, RG's the best. And I'm like, okay. And I think within the first week of meeting RG, and everybody who knows RG, Ryan Grant from Grant's MMA, RG's got that personality. Like, you just fall in love with him. You can't help but fall in love with that man. So I switched over, I think it was 2012. And until pretty much I stopped boxing in COVID, RG was my coach. And he's still like, I still talk to him in that. We did some amateur fights. He was in my corner for some amateur fights. He was coaching me. He wasn't in my corner for 2013 Golden Gloves. But he coached me to win against Mary De Carey. So I beat Mary De Carey for the 2013 Golden Gloves. There's a little bit of a trilogy on that. Still think I beat her at Kansas City ringside that same summer, but the judges didn't see it that way, and that's the way boxing is, right? You know, it's hard knocks. You say don't leave it in the hands of the judges, but that's the way it is. So, well, that was 2013. I had some, because we were with OBA, Ontario Boxing Association, at that time. For anyone who kind of has followed the boxing scene, there was two organizations at one point in time for a few years: Ontario Boxing Association and Boxing Ontario, because like in any sport, there's politics. So, especially boxing, what we've just seen. I had a couple amateur fights, and then I think I was supposed to fight one of your girls as well, and somehow that didn't happen. Oh, I forget why. And so
I feel like fights fall through for various reasons, so not surprised by that at all.
No. And I mean, fortunately now as women, as we've grown so far, and like this Olympics is huge, but this is my so my last amateur fight in 2013 at provincials, or was it 2014 early provincials? I can't remember the timeline now. I have to look at my boxing passport. I fought a girl for my last provincials, and I had a bunch of friends, family, and also clients come out and watch me at the provincials. And so my one client, I was training again a few days later, and he kept calling me this name. He goes, or this acronym. He's like, Bab. He's like, why are we doing this, Bab? Since I'm coaching in boxing, right? Why are we doing that, Bab? And I'm just like, I looked at him, I'm like, why the hell you keep calling me Bab? And he goes, don't you know? Because I didn't finish the part of the provincial. So I stopped, the ref stopped the contest due to injury. So I injured the girl. I think she got a really bloody nose, and it wasn't yeah. So he goes, don't you know your badass button? So I was like, I'm like, I've been called beast. I've been called like all kinds of like monster and all these things training over the years, but I'm like, badass button's way catchier. And so that was my nickname. And then 2014, I turned professional. That was absolutely awesome because it was the first all female. And now that I'm learning more about women's history, it wasn't their first all female North American card throughout history, but that was the way that they were promoting it. Okay. So it was in Gatineau, Quebec, and that was a really pivotal moment. And Kaya came out with me in my walkout song, and that was like, you have these moments in your life when you reflect, or like you've worked up to, And it was one of those serene moments where it was almost like I was obviously nervous and pumped and that walking out, but it was almost like I had an out of body experience with myself, like how many years before, 10 years before. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, I set out to be that number one role model. And here I am doing this for him. And he's walking to the ring with me. So, that was a really pivotal moment. And then I had some really hard personal stuff. And then 2015, I had my last pro fight, and I just wasn't mentally in it anymore after that. And if you're not, boxing's a mental game. So if you're not mentally in it, to like completely win it, because it's a hurt sport, you got to get out. So it's like, I did that. Wanted to do my last like official, what do you call that? Retirement bout for 2020 for a big fundraiser for women and supporting women's sports and abuse for women. But that, like, we all know what happened in 2020. So
I was gonna say, so you know, prior to leading up to going pro, was there something that you were like, I've done everything that I want to do in the amateurs? Were you just like, I think I'm ready for it? I guess, how did you, I know you said you wanted to do it, but what made you decide at that moment that that was the time to transition, if you remember?
yeah, I actually, it was Elias. Elias. How do I say Elias's last name? I think watching him win the Ultimate Fighter, Canada versus Australia, because your teammates, right? They inspire you, they motivate you, they support you. And watching Elias's journey and training with him beside it, and I was like, this guy's fucking crazy. Like, crazy. God love him. I still think about Elias every day. And Elias passed away. Yeah, I'm gonna cry. Fuck. Sorry.
Take your time.
Yeah. And you know, he's just, and these guys who are watching this, who knew Elias, you know, he was just that spirit. No matter what, he always lifted you up, and he was just a crazy character. And watching him go through the process and then win it, is like, I'm ready. Like, you know, and I had a lot of these guys in the gym really help in terms of being like, you know what, you hit harder than a lot of the guys. So, you know, and when you're a girl in a male mostly dominated sports, and I really didn't have many other girls that were training, it was mostly guys at Grants. It was like, okay, well, stop doubting, you know, your abilities and just fricking do it, because it's time.
I feel like with boxing, because it is such a demanding sport, both physically, mentally, emotional, spiritually, like however you want to word it, I think it's all encompassing. It really, at least I'm going to say this from my perspective, and it sounds like you're saying it as well too, is it makes you doubt yourself all the time, because I feel like, because there's always more that you can do. Like you could always go out for another run, you can always be faster on your run. You can always do more rounds of sparring. You can always be better at your rounds of sparring. You can practice more defense. And I just think that because there's always more that you can do, which is why I love the sport so much. There's always more to learn, and there's always more that you can practice. But at the same time, it's also such a struggle, because I feel like you always get to the next level, but there's another level. Like
Yeah.
there's no reprieve. Just kind of like, okay, glad you got there. Now that you've hit that, now you can go back to the start of like trying again, and you know, maybe practicing and failing, but again going back to that, like there's always more that you can do, and therefore it's frustrating because, you know, okay, so you go from amateur, then you go to pro, but then maybe you go to coach, and that, like, there's even more in that realm as well too. So yeah, those are my kind of two like love and hates with the sport, is that it's so awesome, it gives you so much back, which you know said earlier, but then at the same time it also like takes a lot of you as well.
Yeah, it does. And I think when you have a good team around you, they're there to remind you that rest and recovery, and we say this to our clients all the time too, rest and recovery is just as important as the work, because you have to be able to recover and look at things on a restful perspective to be able to push to that next level, because you're going to burn out mentally, emotionally, and physically if you don't, right? So, but the beauty of it, like you said, is that there's always different levels to it, you know? And that's what makes it so cool, because it's just your body.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think one thing that I love, and at Girls Just Want a Box, we're, you know, we're mostly with women, if not exclusively. I've had some male clients in the past, but I think guys tend to always feel strong, or like, I don't know, maybe it's like macho bravado. I don't know what, but I find when a woman like understands that they're strong with just their body weight in that exact moment, it's very powerful. Maybe it's not, I'm not saying that men don't have that. I just don't think they have that like aha light bulb moment, I would say. Whereas I find women find that it's also, you know, so that's something that I always find really interesting, is that like women don't understand that lifting weights is awesome. And I think it's great and they should do that. But at the same time, there is another way to do it. And boxing can really help with that. If lifting weights isn't for you, or, you know, you don't have access to a gym to do that. You know, as you mentioned earlier, boxing, you know, you don't need much, like, not to like bring up COVID, but as like, we learned when we went virtually, you know, you needed like a 4x4 space, and that was it. If you had little hand weights, that was great. It added, you know, a bit more, but you know, all you needed was a little bit of room, and then, you know, your own body. So that was kind of a nice reminder, because, you know, we all go to these traditional gyms and think that like that we need that, and you do. And also do the practice at home as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, well, again, I always say to people, like, boxing is the #1 rated Olympic sport by ESPN, taking all those things that make you as athlete, those 10 or 15 qualities that make you an athlete. And boxing is take them all, average them. Boxing comes out as #1 because it teaches you how to be an athlete in every which way, you know? So that's a sense of confidence that nothing can take away from you when you put the time in to cultivate the skills.
So amateur to professional, I guess, obviously, you know, a bit of a difference in terms of no headgear, first and foremost, smaller gloves, in terms of rounds, way more than 3. How was that transition for you?
At the time, so I'll get to the gloves and all that time, but I started training a little bit different.
Okay.
Meaning I started Olympic lifting. I'd never done that before. It made me so strong and so explosive, but it also really made the weight cuts that much harder that I never had trouble with in the amateurs.
Okay.
So that's what I started to find like a little bit harder. And boxing paid nothing, you know, like you're putting all these time and hours into it. So it started to wear on me emotionally and psychologically, because I'm like, I'm putting all these hours in, you know, my son, I've got to build, like I'm starting to build this business. Mentally, I wasn't all in it anymore. So it wasn't so much, yeah, definitely you feel a lot more. You feel the hits because you use smaller gloves. You know, it feels different. The lights are different. There's no headgear. It's just, it's different, and you take a little bit more damage to your body, right? So looking at those kind of elements, and again, I had something major personal happen that took me to this day. I'm still trying to get over it. So I was like, I cannot, like, if you are not there 100% in that ring and you're in the pros, you're gonna get hurt. And like the last thing I want to do is get hurt and not like have something happen when my son relies on me, right? So But now he's 21 and flown the coop, and I'm actually looking at masters boxing literally like an hour before we got on. Like, I am box. I'm like, could I?
You know what? I will say there are like there's now a lot more in the masters category. I know when we were looking for a few shows a few like months back, maybe even years, at least in the States, I can't say in Canada, but there's a large Facebook group for at least for the amateurs. I'm not gonna, I feel like pro is a little bit harder, but for the amateurs, there's a huge group and people are posting it all the time. There is a tournament in Vegas that happens. I don't want to say when it is because I don't know exactly, but it's pretty large as well too. So there are opportunities, and I think you know, if that's what you want to do, then go for it. I think one thing I don't want to kind of gloss over it. I think that is really important. Is I really commend you for making the decision to stop your professional career at a time when you needed to, because I think as athletes, and I know I do this when we have like even just our all female sparring on the Sunday, and I think I'm doing it like the wrong way. But I always talk to the athletes and I say like, do you want more rounds? How are you feeling? As opposed to talking to the coach. And I know a lot of coaches do not like my approach,
Yeah.
because they want you to talk to them, not the athlete. But in my head, I'm like, it is the athlete that is stepping into the center of that ring.
Yeah.
And it's the athlete that is the only one that can tell you exactly how they are feeling, both physically and mentally. And so I think in my head, which is why I do it my way, I think it's appropriate to ask the athlete, because I've seen coaches being like, yeah, they'll do another. And I'm like, I don't think that they're ready for that. And sometimes it's maybe just giving them a break and then coming back, or sometimes it's cutting them off. And sometimes it can be hard for the athlete to vocalize that, whether it be because of gender, because of age, because of sheer just like, I want to show that I can, because a lot of the times you have to like show your coach ready that you're willing to do it, that because otherwise they might not put you on cards, or offer you up for fight if you want them, because you're supposed to like prove to them that you're ready. So I think that and maybe it was because of your life experience that you decided that that was the right decision. I think it was as well too, but I mean, maybe it was your age and stage. Like obviously there were a lot of different things, but I think it's really important for athletes to know that they should feel comfortable vocalizing how they're feeling, and whether or not they're ready to compete, or ready to start, or whatever that is it is a hurt sport, and it's not a game, right? I think, what is it, box rods, like you don't play boxing, or I feel like other people have said it, but it's not a game, right? And so I don't want to kind of gloss over that, because I think it is really important for athletes to know, and for even coaches to like maybe create an environment where they are comfortable sharing with you. Maybe ask them a bit more than like the once a week, right? Because I think it's really important that athletes feel comfortable doing that, because I'm not saying that there might be less injuries, but that might be, right? That might come out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, it boils down to trust and open communication in the corner too, right? So it's always like RG was great at this. I love he bears his heart and soul for his athletes, because he's like, it's number one defense, like, because it's a hurt sport, and he's like, I don't want to see you like that 60-year-old later on down the road, punched up, like drunk boxer. So he, it was more smart work than hard work. And I'm sure, like, as the sport is progressing, we're gonna be a little bit more like moving away from the old school mentality, all or nothing, and like more, I want to say, the feminine energy, just like with girls just want to box. It's more about communication, it's more about the openness, it's more about the safety net to be able to be like, hey, you know what, this is going on with me. I'm not in there to step back into the ring and spar, you know. And there was times where I've seen athletes who were in sparring and they probably shouldn't have.
And I'm not saying that like it's all on the coaches, right? It's the athlete as well too, knowing their body, like kind of as you said earlier, just like knowing that like, okay, maybe I should take a break. Maybe I do need another rest day. Maybe I do whatever that, like, you know, fill in the blank is. But I think it's important, you know, the coach's responsibility is to help guide the athlete, but it is also up to the athlete to obviously put in the work, but then also put in, like, I don't want to say like the extra work, but there's other things that aren't like the running, the lifting, and the bag work, sparring, pad work, whatever that may be. There's other things, you know, really getting in tune with your body. Boxing can help with that, but then also like understanding it throughout all those different experiences as well too.
Yeah, 100%. It's, I forget what I was going to say about that. Like advocacy for yourself, but understanding that there's all kinds of drills and all things that you can do that you don't have to take impact, right? Like there's so much simulation, different exercises that you can put the work in and not take damage. That's what I wanted to say. It's your brain. You know, protect the pretty.
Yeah, that's it.
Behind the pretty is the brain, right? So
it's everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's actually interesting. You know, someone from the gym, we've had a few people injuries along the way, and you know, one thing I always tell people is there's something that you can do that's very simple, and it actually does not require any physical activity, and that is just watching boxing. Right? Like, and that can help also with the visualization and all those other aspects. And it's something that, like, whether you're injured or not, you know, we all now have YouTube on our phones. And if you want to pull up, you know, you can pull up amateur, you can pull up professional, is to just watch the sport and immerse yourself in it. And that requires, you know, no physical effort really. And it's something that can really help your game. You know, if like you are injured or you do need another rest day or whatever that may be. And that's something, you know, I think what we're seeing now is this, like, train smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Especially from what I've heard from, like, you know, kind of your era of like the old school boxers, and like the coaches, is that I hear them saying, like, you know, I used to do this, like, I don't recommend it. So now I'm, you know, kind of putting this into my clients. So professional career, let's just say it got put on pause because you never know what's gonna happen. You never know. I guess, you know, you already started coaching well before this, and that kind of took that full-time role after your pro career.
Yeah, and I started about a year after I started coaching Parkinson's clients full time with the Rock Steady Boxing Undisputed. So that's how we met, right? Like, because you guys came out and helped sponsor the 2019 Women's White Collar Boxing event, and that was a great collaboration. One of my most favorite memories of coaching and collaboration. You know, so, and many more great things will come, but boxing is a individual sport, like you said, but it takes a team to grow, to collaborate, to come together, and we're on the up and up now as women. Like, it's absolutely awesome to watch after all that, like, watching, you know, all the hard knocks we've taken over the years. It's so exciting.
And how is it being on the other side? So obviously, you know, because I think, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but you know, you're now in the corner for at least that amateur fighter. Again, I believe it was last year or the year before. You know, how does it feel being on the other side?
Freaking harder. And I think all coaches say that because you're like, oh my gosh, you know, because when you're an athlete, you do, you know, your game plan. When you're a coach, you're like, oh my gosh, this was the game plan. You're not following the game plan.
You can only do so much as a coach, right? Like you can only be like, this is the plan, see to it. And then you kind of just let them sink or swim, really.
It's a heart dropping into your gut. Like when I totally understand what RG goes through now as a coach. I was like, I had called him after. I'm like, oh my gosh, RG.
Like, you know, you probably calling your parents being like, I understand when you say like, I will do anything for my child, or any of the things that you kind of like heard growing up, you can now see it full circle, which I think is nice because it gives you that perspective. And then you can call your coach, you know, you're lucky enough to still have them with you and be in contact with them, be like, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also understanding too, because when you're really passionate, you wear your heart on the sleeve as a coach. And it's not to say that you shouldn't give your everything, but not everybody's as committed as you are. So this is something that I've really kind of had to come to terms with, because for the first time in the last 2 months, I've experienced what real burnout is. Like real burnout. I was like, oh my gosh. And I was reading the mental health. I'm like, this is actually a thing on the mental health thing. I'm like, because I've overworked myself and like over everything to it. And it's like, okay, there's a fine kind of a line of how much you give. And like essentially now I understand why the old school coaches were like, the athletes need to prove it. Like again, because it's your heart and your soul that you're putting in there. And if the athlete's not giving back pretty much the same, it can break you.
Well, and I guess for people that like that might not be aware of this, like you're not really making much money off of this, right? Like I don't want to say it's free, but you know, I think the amount of time and effort put into the athletes, it's definitely not, you know, received monetarily, I will say. You know, and kind of going back to like your point, I know I was more scared for my fighter, and I've told Cheryl this before, sending her in the ring. I was more nervous for that than I was for my own first amateur fight, because I could at least control that, right?
Yeah.
I was like, good luck. And, you know, it basically waited for like the round to finish to be like, okay, we stuck to the game plan. This is good. Yeah. Excellent. Like, but then it's the same time, you know, after every round. But, you know, you are giving up, you know, your family time, you're giving up maybe like your prep time to, you know, periodize their plan, checking in on them, you know, and you also like take on, which I think you don't realize it at the time, but like you take on all of their energy, right? Yeah. Like, I know a lot of people have said this, that like when you go into that ring, like it just like, I don't know what, it's a therapy session in a, like it's like a, I would say like in like a drug experience way where just everything pours out.
Yeah.
Whether
that's the addiction behind it, right? And that's why a lot of athletes, I mean, outside of like the coaching aspect, it becomes, when you ideally should stop, you don't, right? Because it is that endorphins, that rush. There's no other high I've ever experienced.
But I think it's important to know is that, and that was one of the reasons why, like when we were looking for ambassadors, was to show, you know, girls and women that there's lots of opportunities within the sport outside of being an athlete.
Yeah.
You know, obviously like I would say like the one that everyone thinks of is coach, for sure. Yeah. That's definitely, but if that's not something that you have the capacity for or want to do, because as we've mentioned earlier, like it's a lot, and some people either want to do it, or they try it and it's just like, it's too much for them. Whatever that may be, like there's so many different opportunities. You know, we have Yvette, who I saw, like I joined earlier, who is, you know, a professional ring announcer. So like there's that option. There's commentating.
Yeah.
There's refereeing. There's also judging, which is, you know, similar but different. I think that there's actually one in the UK, but there is like a female promoter. Like hopefully there will be more as the, you know, the sport keeps growing and more women involved, and the women that retire end up staying in the sport in some capacity. But I think that, hopefully we're doing a small part to showcase that there are opportunities to stay in the sport, be active in it. You can train as long as you want. I know I've seen on Instagram, there's like this, I think he's 86 and he still like hits the bag. And you can always do that. You can do that until you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But there's also other opportunities to stay within the sport to, encourage others and keep the sport growing.
Yeah, exactly. The education, the passion, the enthusiasm, the motivation to keep going. Like everybody has their different aspects of growing the sport, right? So, the more eyeballs we have on it, the more education we have on it, the more it's gonna grow. And like one of my future goals is having like a women's only promotional company. So, but I've gotta lay some foundation business stuff first before that happens. So
maybe,
before I jump ahead.
maybe like, I think that's an amazing opportunity. I think that is something, like, even as I said it, I was like, I believe I'm not going to say her name. If someone wants to fact check me, go for it. But I believe there is one woman that's in the UK that has her own female promotional company, but I think she's the only one that I can think of. And it is, I feel like, one area that is lacking in that regard, because I feel like in other areas there's like the one woman that's doing it, and like hopefully like chairing it for the rest of the kind of upcoming. This actually might be a really good segue. So something that you want to see, in the future is that, and I guess that's something that you're looking at tackling. I know last year, and also if you need to go, hopefully this will be our, if anyone.
I've got a couple. I've got a clients that I'm gonna meet with, and some. We've got a couple meetings coming up here, so I gotta.
No problem.
Yeah.
One last question that I have, unless anyone does have anything else, is, you came with us to the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame. I know we don't have so much time, but I guess, can you explain that experience, given someone that started in the sport, I would say like in its earlier days, not like as early as these women, but maybe earlier in like the rise of women's boxing, and obviously at a time when like the Olympics came in. What was that experience like? Any like moments or things you want to share from that?
Yeah. So I think it was emotional, right? Because we're in an era now where we were wanting this highlight 30, 40 years ago, right? So even in the 2000s. So watching the celebration and the support and the camaraderie of these women that have been in the sport since like the 60s, you mean some in the 80s, some in the 90s, right? Some like myself in the 2000s. It was really awesome and cool and full circle to see how everybody just comes together to celebrate themselves. And for myself personally, it was kind of full circle. It was really cool because I said at the beginning, close to the beginning of this interview here, my first tournament in the first like 2 years, I went to all women's tournament in Nashville, and I lost touch with that coach, Christy, and she was there that invited us out. So I got her contact on that. And I was like, this is so cool. She's like, I always wonder what happened to you. Because there's two Canadian girls that come back down to Nashville on her own and get cornered by like complete coaching strangers. She must have been like, these girls got guts.
But right? It shows that, you were willing to do anything it takes, which I think is something that all coaches really want, to be honest. That's what they want to see. And it proves that same thing of like, you were willing to do whatever it takes because you wanted to do it, and you weren't willing to sacrifice not going, without your coach, or going and not having your coach there with you.
Yeah. And it's not something I would always recommend.
No.
But it's, in this day and age, I think it's a lot more like there's a lot more women in the sport, which is great. So they're going to look out for each other a lot more, right? But it's experience, again, is the key to progression as an athlete. So no matter what sport, but boxing especially, because nothing else teaches you more than being competitive.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. In the, I'll let you kind of leave anything that you want to share with anyone to follow all of your adventures and your future kind of moving forward. We'll leave it in the, I guess, the caption as well too. But any details you want to share that we didn't discuss that you want to get off your chest, I'll leave you with the last parting words.
Yeah, just Button 5 Adventures on Instagram, where we're here right now, and then on Facebook, I'm a lot more active because I'm taking business coaching right now. So my business coaching is like, you got to be active on your private page. So I'm on our Lita Mae Button, so I'm a lot more active there than I am on Button Adventures. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it with what I always leave my stuff with. Remember, movement is medicine, health is your wealth. Most importantly, boxing saves lives. So thank you for having me.
I love that. Thanks, Lita. Take care. Good.
Bye.